Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod. Welcome back to episode number 106. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you had an amazing Thanksgiving if you are celebrating that holiday. It's a packed week. Well, it's been a week of watching exciting things, I should say. It's not been as big of a week because of the Thanksgiving holiday, but I think that the things that we're going to talk about, especially Wake Up Dead Man and Stranger Things Season 5 Volume 1, those are two really big things that I'm excited to talk to you guys about. So, if you haven't subscribed to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, make sure to do so and give this video a like if you could. And let me know what you think about this, what about the podcast in the comments down below, about the topics down below, any of that good stuff. If you are interested in the audio-only platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Overcast, we are on those platforms. That is where the podcast is uploaded in full first, so that is where you can listen to the entire thing, all the topics, before anyone else, and then the full podcast on YouTube will be posted usually on Mondays. It's exciting, guys. I'm really, really excited to talk about that was last week, to talk about Wake Up Dead Man, another W, and Stranger Things Season 5. So without further ado, let's get into today's topics. Alrighty, guys, your mileage is definitely going to vary when it comes to the topic of Rian Johnson, Star Wars, and The Last Jedi. It just is. I am somebody who admittedly really likes The Last Jedi. I've done a few videos on it at this point on the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel and on the Access Blockbusters pod. And I know that not everyone does. And that's totally okay, by the way. I've done a lot of segments and I've done discussions. And we even did a rewatch of the entire Star Wars movies, all the Star Wars movies. And I talked about The Last Jedi. And I said, look, I really think your mileage just may vary based on your experience growing up with Luke Skywalker and all of all the nostalgia and all the different memories that you brought into The Last Jedi. And for me, I really like The Last Jedi. But anyways, that is not the point of this discussion, because yes, Rian Johnson wrote and directed The Last Jedi. And yes, it was quite divisive. And the Star Wars franchise, it might be fair to say, hasn't really recovered since then. But even still, even after The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson was offered a brand new Star Wars trilogy. A brand new set of films to make after The Last Jedi that would focus on a different side of the Star Wars universe. Now, at the time, right, I don't know when this was announced. I want to say it was post 2020, or maybe it was right around the time of The Rise of Skywalker. But you know, it came at a time when I think there was still some optimism within Star Wars that the projects that were being announced were going to be delivered upon. But then, as the years progressed, there was a glut of projects. There were so many projects that were announced that just never came to fruition. There was Rogue Squadron. There was the Benioff and Weiss trilogy. There was the Sean Levy is now making a movie, but there was the Michael Waldron, Kevin Feige movie. There was the Taika Waititi movie. So many Star Wars movies that just never came to fruition. And Rian Johnson's trilogy kind of sat buried under all of that heat, because even if that trilogy had gotten made, and I say this as somebody who loves Rian Johnson generally and his work, I love Knives Out. Knives Out is one of my favorite movies. He is the mastermind behind the Knives Out franchise. I think Knives Out is a fantastic movie. I really like Glass Onion. I cannot wait for Wake Up Dead Man. It's coming out in just a little bit here. I think that he's really gifted. He's really skilled. I say this as somebody who really admires his work. I really like The Last Jedi. I just don't know if another Rian Johnson Star Wars movie was the right move post Last Jedi, just given how divisive that movie was, because there was just not going to be a way where he made a Star Wars movie and it wasn't going to be divisive as well, even if the movie itself was much better received. So it's just been quiet for a long time. And even as recently as this year, I want to say, he's come out and said, oh no, I'm still totally talking to Kathleen Kennedy about it, and we're totally still down to do the movie. Or to do the trilogy. And I was just kind of thinking, okay, is this true? Because it's been years since this trilogy was announced. What does any of this mean? Well, now, a new profile, a new article, I guess a long interview with Rian Johnson was published by The Hollywood Reporter. Lots of good stuff in there about his career and the Knives Out franchise. But, of course, a big pivotal part of his career is the Star Wars portion of it. And a couple other interesting nuggets before we get to the Star Wars trilogy part of it all. He said actually that, or the article states that he actually was offered the part, or the the job to direct Star Wars Episode 9, but he actually turned it down after how divisive The Last Jedi was. Which, you know, and this was, mind you, this was all post Colin Trevorrow, who was going to direct Star Wars Episode 9, post his firing. So, Star Wars was in a bit of a turmoil at that point anyways. And then J.J. Abrams eventually came back to direct Episode 9. So he actually was offered Episode 9. Looks like Lucasfilm liked Episode 8 enough to offer him Episode 9. And he turned it down just because of how just harsh some of the backlash was. And look, I mean, even if you guys hate The Last Jedi, that's totally fine. I think we all must agree, though, it is just not acceptable to target any ire or hatred that we might have about a movie towards an individual, towards a person. It's just not the way that this should go. And if, you know, the amount of backlash that Rian Johnson, I'm sure he got, and that's discussed in this article a little bit, it's crazy. It's terrible. So they discuss a little bit of that in this article as well. And so then they talk about this trilogy that we have all been wondering, is it going to happen? Is it not? And this is what the article has to say. Quote, Johnson had signed on to mount a fresh Star Wars trilogy in 2017. So it looks like it was well before The Rise of Skywalker. And while that plan is effectively dead, he isn't saying goodbye yet. Quote, a part of my brain will always be Star Wars, end quote. And he actually goes on. He says, quote, it's as much a part of me in the way I think. It's so much a part of me in the way I think. So, you know, Hollywood Reporter is the one saying that this trilogy is effectively dead, but it's all kind of part of this profile, I think, and I have to assume that if the Hollywood Reporter put it in this article, then it is pretty much true. This trilogy is effectively dead. And look, again, in a vacuum, right? Just for me, just me, right? Being selfish. I would love nothing more than to see a Rian Johnson Star Wars trilogy. I really would. Because if for nothing else, he's a visionary. And I think he would have some really great and creative ideas. I don't think every part of The Last Jedi works. I don't. But I love enough of it to really want to see more. But again, we don't live in this vacuum. And for Rian Johnson to do another Star Wars movie at this point in time, I just think would be another wedge in the fan base that is already so incredibly fractured. I don't think The Mandalorian and Grogu is going to fix it. And frankly, I don't think Star Wars Starfighter is going to fix it. I don't know what is going to fix it. But I think that another Rian Johnson Star Wars movie, it's perhaps just not the right time for it. And I hope he continues making Knives Out movies. I hope he continues to make original content for the time being, and maybe even sinks his teeth into another franchise. But yeah, I mean, for now, we'll have to see. Maybe this trilogy will get made in 10 years, but as of the recording of this segment, it looks like this trilogy is not going to happen. So guys, what do you make of this? The Rian Johnson Star Wars trilogy looks like it is no longer happening. Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, one of the many, many questions that is plaguing Star Wars right now, perhaps not the most important one, but I still think a question nonetheless. Is there ever going to be a Mandalorian Season 4? We are getting a live-action theatrical movie in Star Wars. What a crazy concept. It will have been 7 years, almost, 6.5 years, between Star Wars movie releases, which, again, you know, between prequel and sequel trilogies was... I mean, that's nothing. You know, between Revenge of the Sith and Force Awakens, there was 10 years between that. So you might be saying, 6.5 years, not a big deal. But, I mean, there were so many plans for different Star Wars movies, and it fizzled out. And so Mandalorian and Grogu coming out next May 2026, it just feels like, I don't know, is it too little too late? We'll have to see about all that next May. But there have always been rumors and questions about, does that mean a Mandalorian Season 4 is canceled? Is it still going to happen after the movie? Or is the movie basically Mandalorian Season 4? I think those are fair questions to be asking of what this movie really is and how it fits into the grand scheme of the Mandalorian story. So then recently, Jon Favreau, the director of the movie and one of the executive producers of the entire story of The Mandalorian, actually gave some comments. And on the one hand, I think clear up a couple things. On the other hand, I still think leave some open-ended questions. So let's dive into this. He says... in these quotes, he says, quote, we were planning on doing a 4th season. I had actually written all of that. I still have Season 4 sitting on my desk here. But then he talks about the movie, right? So he's transitioning from talking about Season 4 to the movie. And he says, quote, it's structured around a movie structure as opposed to a serialized weekly television show. So there's a larger throw to the whole thing. So a couple things to look at here. First of all, he says he had actually written all of a Mandalorian Season 4, and it's still there, right? It's still there. It seems like, from his comments that there will still be, so this Mandalorian and Grogu movie, there is still a difference between the Mandalorian and Grogu movie and what season 4 was. So it looks like the Mandalorian season 4, again, probably they took some elements from it and brought it to the Mandalorian and Grogu, but it also, it feels like it's its own thing, right? The Mandalorian and Grogu is its own thing. And Mandalorian season 4 is just sitting there. Based on his comments, right? And we don't have actual concrete, as far as I know, I was looking through a lot of different articles and none of them seem to have any other comments or context around this, but if you have any, please let me know and drop them in the comments. But from what I have been able to read, from what I've been able to see, it feels like, from Jon Favreau's comments, that Mandalorian season 4 is still sitting there, aka, it's not going to happen. Which I think, honestly, makes some sense. I think it would be pretty hard, not physically, or not even logistically, or not even canonically to do this, but I think just in the minds of fans to take Mandalorian from TV and bring it to the movies, and then bring it back to TV. I think that would be kind of difficult. I think if Mandalorian and Grogu just doesn't succeed, I have to imagine that's it for The Mandalorian, which is honestly a bummer. I mean, I'm not somebody, I've always said this, I'm not somebody who loves Mandalorian. I like it. I really didn't like season 3 at all. It was just not my cup of tea. I like season 2. I like season 1. I think there were a lot of good episodes. I also think there were a lot of episodes I just didn't really enjoy in both seasons, but that's fine. You know, I enjoy Mandalorian, right, for what it is. But I would be disappointed, regardless of that, even if it's not my favorite show of all time, to see it just fade and fizzle out. It was such a big moment in pop culture and in Star Wars when The Mandalorian came onto the scene. It was exciting, again, because people really seemed on board with it, and then it just kind of faded. And so if Mandalorian and Grogu, critically or box office or both, doesn't do well, I think that's it. Now, if it does do well, I still think that doesn't mean it's going to get another season, because then I think you're just going to make a sequel, another movie, which I think would be the right move, by the way. So, to me, while Jon Favreau might have a Mandalorian season 4 written and ready to go, I don't think at this point there is a feasible scenario. Again, it's possible that they just, you know, if Mandalorian and Grogu even bombs or is fine, then they'll just say, we'll just go back to television. That's fine. Even then, I feel like the most likely scenarios indicate that there will not be another season of television for The Mandalorian, which again, I don't know. I mean, I hope the movie does really well, right? I'm conflicted because I hope the movie is great and it just kills it at the box office, but I also think that it would have been really nice for The Mandalorian just to have gone on for 7 seasons or something like that and have just had a really successful run. At this point, the legacy of The Mandalorian, I don't know what it's going to be, but it's gone from something that really rejuvenated fans' excitement in Star Wars to something that is now a little more complicated than I think it needed to be. So we will see about all of that, but guys, I think that this is something that we should be monitoring moving forward. Let me know what you think about this in the comments down below. Do you think there is going to be a season 4, or would you just like to see another movie after this? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, 'tis the season, apparently, for scary clowns and demonic creatures and all sorts of terrifying things. It's really not. It's the season for giving and for kindness, but here we are on the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel and on the Access Blockbusters pod talking about the latest episode for the HBO and HBO Max show, Welcome to Derry. So this is going to be a full spoiler discussion on episode 5 of Welcome to Derry. If you have not seen the episode, no worries, just make sure to save the segment, save the video, and save the podcast for later. I've gotten this question before of why the segments, the individually clipped segments of Welcome to Derry, basically don't come out until right before the next episode. It's just a scheduling thing for when I lock the podcast episode, but hopefully, if you're tuning in, it's a nice little primer and a nice little, I don't know, just appetizer before you watch the next episode. So anyways, that is the hope. And the hope is that as well, if you look back on all of these after the show is wrapped, you can kind of just binge through all of them and hear my thoughts. But anyways, we are here to talk about episode number 5. So honestly, you know, I feel like over the last 2 years, or the last year even, year plus of doing the podcast basically full time, I've noticed a few things about these HBO Max shows. I think generally they're really good. They're pretty good, right? But I noticed that a lot of them start off really strong, start off with a bang, and then kind of fizzle out until you're just confused by the end. And maybe they kind of grapple you back towards the ending, the last couple episodes, but I feel like the middle chunk of a lot of these HBO shows over the past 12 to 15 months have been pretty similar in that regard. I think the one exception has been Penguin. I think Penguin was just phenomenal throughout. But I'm talking about shows like Creature Commandos. I'm talking about a show like Dune Prophecy, or a show like The Last of Us Season 2. I think all of these shows that we've done reviews on the channel, you can go back and check. I feel like every one of those shows, I started out being like, oh, interesting. Okay, really like that. And to be fair, the pilots and the first couple episodes generally of these shows are the ones that have the most to gain by being explosive and by being exciting. So I'm not saying that it's not a common thing to HBO only, right? Some of the Marvel MCU shows are also like that, for example. But I think that I've noticed the trend of, as the episodes go on, I feel the sense of, where are we going? Why are we going this way? And what's the point? I feel like Dune Prophecy was very similar. So I say all this to say, Welcome to Derry has been a very similar experience to me. I think that Welcome to Derry started out really interestingly, right? Especially when you were setting up Phil, Susie, and Teddy, I think, was the other kid, and then also Lily and Ronnie as being, these are the new It kids. And then, surprise, 3 of them are dead. And, of course, Maddie gets taken in the first few minutes. So the first episode really did a lot to subvert expectations, which I thought was fascinating. I thought was really, really cool. But then episodes 2 through 4, I understand. Some people in the comments have been saying, well, I don't want this just to be a Pennywise show. I agree. I would prefer if this show was just not Pennywise the entire time, just saying, hey, I'm spooky, look at me, right? But I do think that the show, as presented to us over the last few episodes, has been heading towards the path of Pennywise. And so I felt like, and this is perhaps just my own perception, but last episode felt like the episode where, okay, we gotta go. We kind of have to, lay the groundwork for what the second half of the show is going to be. Instead, I felt like last episode was, I don't know, more of the same of, yeah, we're getting there. Well, you'll see him. We're getting somewhere. Don't worry about it. And so at that point, I was like, I don't know. I mean, I think the show is okay. It's been good, but I just don't really know where we're going. Episode 5, I will say, Episode 5, I think, is my favorite episode of the 5 thus far. There's 3 more after this, but I think Episode 5 is my favorite. And it's not just because we see Pennywise. That is not the only reason, right? We didn't have to see Pennywise the clown himself just for this episode to be good. What I think this episode finally did was bring together disparate storylines. And that, to me, was a big deal. Because again, it's fine to have a lot of different subplots and a lot of different storylines going on at the same time. If they don't connect in a way that feels satisfying, if they don't connect in a way to which you're understanding why they were placed in that way at different points, then there's no point, honestly. Just simplify. I think, 'tis the season, right? We'll talk about Stranger Things more later, but 'tis the season for Stranger Things. One of the things that I think the shows do so well, and you cannot like season 3 and you cannot like season 2 and whatever, totally fine. But one of the things I think Stranger Things does so well is they have all these different storylines going on, but by the end of it, they all coalesce. I think season 2 is a great example of this, where the characters are split up pretty much the whole show. You have the Will, Mike, Joyce Hopper sort of contingent in the lab, and then you have Jonathan and Nancy, and then you have Lucas, Dustin, Max, and Steve. And it's episode, I want to say 7 or 8, maybe 6, 7, or 8, one of those episodes, where they all come together, and it feels satisfying. It feels like it makes sense. And so I don't know, maybe I'm just waiting for that to happen here, but finally we have storylines coalescing here. The kids, right? So there's so many characters in the show. I think that's one other thing, to be honest with you, that about the show is there's just too many characters, and it's just hard to get acclimated and to really dive into any one of them in particular when just crazy things are happening all over the place with them. But the kids, right? So we have Ronnie, we have Lily, Will, Rich, and the Maddie character, which we all knew it was Pennywise, right? Of course. It's interesting though that he can kind of take that form outside of the sewers, and he sleeps during the day, but he apparently can just come out, and that's totally fine. So interested to see if that is explored any further. But yeah, we have the kids, and also Marge, I want to say, the one with the missing eye. She's also a part of the kids group as well. And then we have, I think Leroy Hanlon, right? He is, the whole military aspect of it all is starting to coalesce with the Native American story of it all. And so they are now exploring the sewers together. And so that is starting to coalesce. And then you have him meeting with the kids. And I thought that scene where he accidentally kills his companion, his fellow soldier there, was really well done, because you understand what he's, what's going on. It's set up so well at the beginning of the episode where he's seeing his wife, and it turns out it's Pennywise, and so he obviously is trained to shoot, but then it just makes sense when he sees his son that he would also make that same mistake, even though it was actually his real son. So I think all of that played really, really well in the show. It was very dramatic. I will say is it Halloran? I never know how to pronounce his last name, but the guy who has mind reading powers, I feel like he is the least convincing part of the show. Again, not to say that there aren't mystical elements and there aren't crazy fantasy sci-fi things that are going on with Pennywise the Clown. It just feels like his character is so random. I know, by the way, that this is a character that has a lot more or more implications and ramifications to the wider Stephen King universe, right? They mentioned Shawshank, I think, in this episode, I want to say. This is a character I understand that kind of crosses over to different properties. So I get that in other things, there's more exploration of this character. But for me, as somebody who just is seeing this, right, and is not a super big Stephen King fan in general, and is just watching this character feels weird to me. Just oddly out of place, just the magical, mystical kind of character that just kind of dips in and out when he's needed. And there's not a whole lot of explanation as to what's going on there. So that's just me, but that's one thing I've noticed. But again, right, I think this episode, finally, and I really liked, by the way, is it Niebolt, the house? I liked that there's a direction of, okay, we're going to head for this house now, and we're going to track this thing down. And I like that sort of forward momentum of the episode. And then, yeah, I like how everything went wrong, because of course everything goes wrong. You are fighting the enemy on its own, no pun intended, its own turf, and you're going to face the consequences. So now I really feel like, okay, so we're getting the momentum, we're getting what we need to see here. We understand that, yes, this is, we need to lick our wounds, and then we need to move on from here, and what happens now, and also that weird artifact thing that Lily picks up that prevents Pennywise from killing her. So a lot of really interesting things to look at and to monitor as we go forward here. But I think that this episode, I'm not going to say it makes the previous four just all of a sudden, oh, these are amazing, these are the best episodes I've ever seen. I don't think so. Just as I said for Agatha All Along, it seems unrelated, but I think the last couple episodes of Agatha All Along really helped to justify a lot of the decisions, the overarching story decisions that were going on in that show. Didn't necessarily mean I loved those individual episodes of The Witch's Road and those mini trials. I wasn't necessarily for me. But I do think that those last couple episodes really helped to make me understand what they were going for. Similarly, I don't think that this episode in itself is going to just make me go, oh, this is, the whole show makes sense now, I get it. But rather, I think that it just helps to instill more confidence in me that this show is heading in an interesting direction. So those are my thoughts on episode 5 of It Welcome to Derry. I enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to next episode. I think I'm back on board. What did you guys think of the episode? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, pretty safe to say that Wicked has become a phenomenon. And there are a lot of different ways in which you could use that word, phenomenon. I think we oftentimes actually use that word a little too lightly, in my opinion. But I think for Wicked, it is truly a word that applies. And a lot of times, I think we talk about it in the sense of being a cultural phenomenon, just the way that it has totally taken over the popular pop culture and just popular media, no pun intended, over the last year, and just really become something of its own. It obviously the Broadway musical was incredibly popular and well received in its own right. But I think this 2-part movie epic that's been going on for the last year now, I think has really captured the world and captivated the world in a very different way. So obviously it's become a huge cultural phenomenon. However, it has also, the franchise has quietly become a box office phenomenon as well, and that's what we're here to talk about, as well as just some loose rumors about Wicked 3, perhaps. We'll just kind of stick that at the end of the segment as well, but let's talk about the box office first. So, I'm looking at box office numbers. I'm recording this, I think, before the final numbers have come out, and obviously when you're listening to this segment, it'll be about a week after, but I think that it's still worth discussing the first weekend, just to give a sense of where Wicked is heading in its box office run. So, Wicked for Good entered the weekend and came out as number 1. No big surprise. It wasn't really competing with a whole lot, although it will be competing with a few movies that we'll talk about in a little bit here. But it wasn't really competing with a whole lot. But it came out of the weekend as number 1 with a domestic gross of $150 million and $226 million worldwide. So let me see that again. $150 million domestically and $226 million worldwide. For context, this is higher than the first Wicked, which opened to $114 million domestically at basically the exact same time in the year. And that movie went on to make over $700 million. So between $700 and $800 million is a huge success, especially for a musical and a Disney, Marvel, Star Wars kind of movie, DC, right? So it's a huge deal, right? And I think the question became after that point, because of how successful Wicked was and it won Oscars and things like that, could Wicked for Good make $1 billion? I myself predicted that it would. And after looking at these numbers, I have a lot of confidence that that's still going to be the case. Now, for some more context with 2025 as well, I'm looking at an article here that's pointing out some of these numbers. In terms of opening box office weekend, it is the second highest opening box office weekend domestically this year, behind a Minecraft movie, which was $162.75 million, and third place, which is Lilo and Stitch at $146 million. Lilo and Stitch went on to, I believe, become the first billion-dollar film of 2025 in worldwide gross, and a Minecraft movie, I think, just made under $1 billion. So it was in that high $900 million range. So that bodes very well for Wicked for Good. It is worth pointing out, then let's be clear, it is worth pointing out that Wicked for Good, and it's regardless of whatever I have to say about the movie, I did my review last week and you can go check it out there, regardless of what I have to say personally, it is worth pointing out, Wicked for Good's reviews, and I think general word of mouth has been, it's not as good as the first movie. So one has to wonder that while Wicked Part 1 had less initial momentum with its box office run and eventually went on to make $700 million at the box office, whether or not Wicked for Good, the opening box office numbers are going to really inflate the initial momentum, but then the word of mouth is perhaps going to detract from it a little bit. I'm not saying it will. I actually still, just based on these numbers, because if these numbers came out and it was Wicked for Good makes less in its opening weekend than the first Wicked, I would have been a little concerned about its ability to keep momentum going with word of mouth. But, people still generally liked it. I think the movie has something like 65 to 70% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I think people generally liked it. I liked it, generally speaking. I don't think it's nearly as good as the first movie, but I still liked it. And so I think, all the people who were going to see Wicked for Good are going to see Wicked for Good. It's the Thanksgiving holiday window. And I think also the people in between who didn't get to see Wicked in theaters last year, but eventually did get around to seeing it, I think are also going to be joining along for the ride. So I do feel pretty confident in Wicked for Good's ability to get close, I think, to the $1 billion mark. Is it going to be a failure if it doesn't make $1 billion? Absolutely not. If Wicked for Good even matches Wicked's box office numbers, huge success, in my opinion. Again, not knowing the exact numbers and calculations for profit, but I think a huge success in that regard. So we'll have to see. I think there's going to be some competition. Zootopia 2 is opening on Wednesday, or on November 26th, Thanksgiving Day, or the day before Thanksgiving, rather. And Zootopia 1 made $1 billion, so we'll have to see if those numbers are going to stunt Wicked for Good's numbers pretty severely. I don't remember last year there being, I could be totally wrong about this, I don't remember there being a huge movie that completely derailed Wicked's box office. Mufasa came out in December, so there was that. But yeah, Zootopia 2 might be a detractor, Five Nights at Freddy's 2 might be a detractor, and obviously Avatar Fire and Ash in 3 weeks will definitely be a detractor for Wicked for Good. But again, pretty different, still similar age ranges, I suppose, but I think different demographics of the movie-going audience, so we'll have to see how that all shakes out. Now, I promised at the beginning we were going to talk a little bit about Wicked 3 rumors, and I didn't want to make a separate segment because at this point in time, it's just sort of been people who are part of Wicked saying, let's talk about Wicked Part 3. There have been a decent number of people on the Wicked front saying, if there's a story for Part 3, let's make a Part 3. And I think that, Cynthia or Ariana Grande had hinted that there might be future plans, but then she later backtracked on it. So really just raising the question at the end of the segment, should there even be a Wicked 3? Well, from a box office perspective, it seems fairly obvious that the studio should make a Wicked 3, even though there is really no there's no precedent for it. There's no source material. So it would be a story that takes place post Wicked for Good. Again, no spoilers in this segment for Wicked for Good. I don't know. Again, it feels like you're really trying to test your luck at that point. If you want to push the envelope, you could, and there is a way in which it could be successful. I just feel like this is such a lightning in a bottle kind of moment with Wicked 1 and Wicked for Good that I just don't see it being that successful. But again, I could be wrong. At this point in time, nobody's come out right and said there are active plans for it. I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, since if by the time I published this segment from the time I recorded it, there has been something. But again, I don't think that there's anything there right now. And I personally think let's just let this be a 5-hour epic and then move on from there. So anyways, guys, what do you make, first of all, of Wicked for Good's initial box office numbers? Do you think it can still hit $1 billion? And do you think there will be a Wicked Part 3? And do you even think there should be a Wicked 3? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, today on the Access Blockbusters pod, today on the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, we have the privilege of doing something that I don't really get to do a whole lot. And that is talk about a movie that the general movie-going audience has not had a chance to see yet. Now, normally, critics of some kind of notoriety get press screenings and are able to see the movies even weeks in advance. I am unfortunately not at that level. I have not been to press screenings, although I would very much like to. But in this case, it's a little bit interesting because today we are going to be talking about the third, I would say third movie in the franchise, but it's more like just in the set of, in the universe, the third movie in the universe of Knives Out. We're going to be talking about Wake Up Dead Man. This is, again, the third movie in this Knives Out universe, which, again, these three movies don't have a whole lot to do with one another, except for the connective tissue that is Daniel Craig's Benoit Blanc. I had a chance to see it in theaters. Now, Knives Out, Wake Up Dead Man is playing in very select theaters, at least in my area. I don't know if you guys are experiencing this as well. In my area, it wasn't playing in any of the big theaters, so I had to go and go to a smaller theater to check it out during the Thanksgiving week. Was able to do so. I believe it will be going out, or will be making theatrical runs over the next couple weeks, and then it will be hitting Netflix on December 12th. But again, I have the chance to watch it in theaters because I love this franchise. I love this franchise, so I wanted to talk about it and review it here with you guys. So this is going to be a non-spoiler and then spoiler review in one segment. So I will be talking about the film in complete non-spoiler detail. And again, with these mysteries, with these whodunits, it's important for me, especially, to not reveal, to reveal as little as possible, I should say, about what is going on in this movie. So we're only going to be talking about this movie in really vague terms, with a cast, perhaps, and with some of the things you see in the trailers, but really nothing other than that. And then just giving some thoughts. And then we will dive into the spoiler section of Wake Up Dead Man. So hopefully then you guys will have seen it, and then you can check it out there as well. So let's dive in. Like I said before, I love this franchise. I remember watching the first Knives Out almost on a whim. I think some friends convinced me to watch it with them, and I was blown away. I just thought the first movie had such a compelling mystery, such a compelling way of subverting the whodunit, right? Where it's not that you know, or you're trying to figure out who did it, but you kind of get the answer of how it was done, and then you're tracing the steps backwards. I love it. I love those kinds of movies. And Knives Out always will carry a very special place in my heart. I've seen that movie at least 2 or 3, 4, 5 times now at this point, so really, really love it. The second movie, Glass Onion. So, at that point, it was announced that it was going to be a franchise, and there were going to be more movies, and there was going to be a second movie called Glass Onion that was going to be released on Netflix and all that kind of stuff, and there were going to be more films. So, I was really excited. Glass Onion, I liked. I actually still, I like Glass Onion. I do. Is it, to me, as strong as Knives Out? I don't think so. No. But I said at the time, and I will continue to say again, I just hope RIAN Johnson, director of these films, writer of these films, and also the director and writer of Star Wars: The Last Jedi, one of the better Star Wars films in my opinion, but I know not everyone agrees with that. But I said, if he just keeps making these movies in perpetuity, I would be so happy with that. I grew up on Agatha Christie and Sherlock Holmes, Conan Doyle, and just love the whodunits. I love them. So I was very excited for Wake Up Dead Man. And I also knew, right, I had also seen that Wake Up Dead Man had been getting very good reviews before the film even hit theaters. So went into Wake Up Dead Man, knew almost nothing about the story, knew the general cast, right, knew some of the bigger names, but really went into it fresh. I love this movie. Here's something about this movie, though, that I think your mileage may vary before we get into some of the more general things that, the movie-going things. But just to be upfront with you guys about this movie, this is not a YouTube channel that generally talks about things like politics or things like religion, not because I don't think those things are important, but because I think that I want to keep the focus on movies and television shows and things like that here. But obviously, art imitates life, imitates art, right? And movies and shows often have a lot of things to say about what's going on in the real world. Knives Out 3, Wake Up Dead Man, has a lot to say about religion, about politics, about society, about people, and about humanity. It's a very, very loaded film in terms of its thematic qualities. That's not to say it's just a dark and depressing film, although there are a few moments within this movie that I found myself to be genuinely moved by, which I was not expecting at all from a Knives Out movie, to be quite honest with you. But there are a couple moments that truly I can call emotional moments. Really good moments. But again, that's not to say that this is a dark and depressing movie throughout. It has darker elements for sure. I mean, it's a murder mystery, right? So there are things going on that are, yeah, I would say not appropriate for younger children. Just in terms of its being people dying and things like that. So, there's that. But this film has jokes too. It's funny in places, it's sharp in places, it's witty. So it is still that very classic blend that Rian Johnson has been able to strike. But again, this movie has a lot to say about the current state of specifically Christianity, Catholicism, religion, politics, things of that nature. And so while I will not be delving into my own specific views and how I perceive this movie for me personally, I will say I personally really do enjoy when a movie or show is able to sharply and astutely and also generously, right, not attacking a particular viewpoint or being in stark opposition to a certain person or affiliation, but rather being, generous, but also being honest and truthful and sharp. I really love when movies and shows can do that politically, religiously, socially, any of those things. I love when movies have really sharp things to say. And Knives Out 3, right, Wake Up Dead Man, has a lot to say about that. And that is one of the things I really loved about this movie. Understanding that, you may not, right? If you are not interested in hearing, watching a movie that has these sorts of implications and things to ponder and things like that, because it's not just a moment, it is throughout this movie. And I love that. You may not. And so I just wanted to bring that out there up front, that this is I think the other two Knives Out movies have things to say, right? I think the first movie had some things to say about immigration and immigrants and things like that. The second movie had things to say about just rich billionaires and tech billionaires and things like that. This movie, I think, is much more upfront with what it's trying to say. So that is something to keep in mind. But I loved it. Daniel Craig as Benoit Blanc kills it. As always, he is amazing. He's awesome. I think that he is really settling into this role now where, yeah, I think in the first movie he had to be the main character for the most part. Also Ana de Armas, but, I think he was really the main character to establish him as the detective. In this movie, he's not really the main character. I would argue that there are other main characters in this movie that have more screen time, have more presence than him, but he is filling that role so well of the detective, and Benoit Blanc. I just love seeing him every single time. The cast is great. The cast is phenomenal. Some standouts to me. Josh Brolin, in his role, is playing a very specific kind of personality, and I think he kills it. He is, again, I don't want to give anything away. I truthfully don't want to give anything away about who he is and what his motivations are. I will just say he is playing a very strong personality, and he kills it. He does a great job with it. He is awesome in that role. Josh O'Connor, somebody that I had not been as familiar with his work before. He has a pretty big role in the movie, and I think he does a fantastic job. He's actually asked to carry a lot of the emotional moments in this movie as well. And I think that in those moments, he's able to bring out a very real side of humanity from his character that I think is very profound, and I think that it works quite well. Other standouts as well. You have people like Thomas Hayden Church, Kerry Washington, Jeremy Renner. So there are a lot of amazing, Glenn Close, of course, a lot of amazing actors in this movie, and they all do a great job. But I think those are the ones that I wanted to highlight and really stood out to me as being, again, just really, I think, really big standouts in this movie. It's hard to pinpoint one particular person, right, when you're talking about a movie with a cast of this magnitude. But I think that, I think for me, as long as the ensemble is working in tandem and everyone is playing their roles well, and the main characters are allowed to shine, I think for me, that makes it all worth it. So I was really, really happy about that. In terms of the actual mystery, again, no spoilers, no story details here. I was impressed. I think, if I think about Rian Johnson, right, and I think about how you have to weave this narrative together and how complicated it is, but how satisfying it ends up being, it must be a nightmare to write these kinds of movies, because I just can't imagine the amounts of twists and turns. But this is a 2-hour and 20-minute movie, and I was captivated the entire time. There was never a moment where I was bored. Every single time I thought I figured something out, or every single minute that they revealed something, then led to more questions. So I was never in this moment of, oh, I got it. I totally got it. Because even if they answer something, that's what's so brilliant about movies like these. When they answer something, they bring up whole other swaths of questions that you just have no idea what to make of. So again, in that regard, this movie, and it's dealing with, again, loose terms, right? It's dealing with a murder. It's a murder mystery. It's taking place at a church. There are a lot of fascinating scenarios where these characters are put in, where these characters are forced to talk and find themselves in, and tying the religious elements together with this church. I think it all works really well. At the end of the day, there are little nitpicks here and there. Like, I think some parts of the ultimate answer, you're kind of looking back and going, oh, didn't see that one quite coming. Like, wasn't set up as well as I thought. But okay, it is what it is. But really, Wake Up Dead Man, I think is a Knives Out. It's a worthy movie, worthy mystery of the Knives Out mantle. I don't know if any Knives Out movie, frankly, will ever top the original, just because it really does have a special place in my heart. But this movie gets close. It is, yes, people have been saying, it is darker. It is darker. There are dark things that happen in this movie. It is more emotional. Certainly. There are, like I said, there are moments in this movie that actually moved me unexpectedly. It is, I think, wittier. It is funnier. Like, the other two films have their moments of wit. I think Benoit Blanc plays a perfect role, fills a perfect role in that sense. And it is more stark about how it, what this movie wants to say, what Rian Johnson, I would think, wants to say about the state of the world, and all those things put together with a great mystery, another fantastic mystery. To me, I'm going to say it now, right? As of post-Thanksgiving 2025, understanding that I haven't seen every single movie, and I will, there are going to be other Oscar movies that I'm going to see. This is, I think, my favorite movie of the year thus far. I just had such a good time. It's entertaining. It's not one of those movies that has things to say that's so dark and oppressive. It was entertaining. It was fun. But again, it really struck a lot of the chords that I look for in a movie. And I was blown away. So those are my non-spoiler thoughts for Wake Up Dead Man. I would highly recommend it. If you can find a theater to see it, I would recommend seeing it in a theater. It's a really fun experience. But again, if you can't, then watch it on Netflix on December 12th. We are going to dive in now to some spoilery details. So, assuming that not a lot of you who are watching this review in November before the Netflix release have seen the movie thus far, or in early December. No worries, just make sure to save the segment, save the podcast, save the episode for later, and then come back once you have seen the movie. So, again, and we're diving into full spoilers now, so here we go. I think, right, first of all, I think that the mystery was great. I think, hinging on the fact that you see Wix, right, Josh Brolin's character, and he dies, and the whole time there's this really interesting symbolism and intertwining of religion, right, with Christianity, of resurrection. And so you're wondering, okay, so then, is Wix actually dead? Can he be raised from the dead? Because later on, a figure actually comes out of the tomb. I thought all those things coming together really made for a fun and interesting mystery. I knew that Martha had something to do with it from the very beginning, because it's sort of that screenwriting, plot device technique where it's kind of the smoking gun, right? Where you see Martha talking to Wix's mother, and you don't see what her lips are saying, right? You don't actually hear what she's saying, and the camera kind of zooms out at that point. And so when that happened, I was thinking, okay, I think I know that this moment is going to be revealed to be something later in the movie, and sure enough, Martha is sort of the ultimate culprit. But I liked that there were other players involved, right? Like I said, they really did get me, and I think that it's the fun part of these kinds of movies where Benoit Blanc makes Father Judd write down the entire thing and write down the entire story, which is the framing device for the beginning of the movie. And then once Benoit Blanc finishes reading it, he kind of sits down and he goes, "So tell me why you did it." And at that point, right, there was no other context for that. I was thinking, oh, so Father Judd is the one who did it. And there are other places in the movie where, it's almost like the movie's trying to convince you that he is the one that did it. And so really the movie got me to buy into that, which is clever on its part, right? Because all of a sudden you're questioning everything and you're trying to figure out what was going on. And I think it's really good. Only then to have us realize that it was talking, the line was talking about the flask that Josh Brolin's character dropped. I will say, speaking to an earlier point, I think that, I'm on the fence about this, because yes, I would love more Benoit Blanc. And the fact that he wasn't in, other than the first couple scenes, he wasn't in the first 45 minutes of the movie at all, was a little disheartening. I mean, obviously he took a major role for the next hour and a half, but I would have liked to have seen him a little bit more, but I understand what the framing device was. So it is just more of a personal, I would have liked to have seen Daniel Craig's Benoit Blanc a bit more. But again, it's just, it's not something that we can control, right? So, I think that it works for what it is, but I always love to see Daniel Craig play this role. But again, I think, some of the things that really struck me, I think that this is, again, not getting too far into Christianity or religion or politics and things like that, but this movie has a lot to say about just what religion is in America today, what society is today in America, and really what genuine grace and kindness should look like and forgiveness should look like in today's age. And I think that those are all things where, the movie could have been very cynical about these sorts of things. But I do think that while there are pretty stark truths about society in this movie, I also think that there are some really nice and hopeful elements to the movie as well. And I really, really do appreciate that. So, again, I think that, all the characters in this movie, just trying to rattle down. I think Josh O'Connor, I guess that this is where I'll land on for this review. But Josh O'Connor really surprised me because he had to shoulder, I think he is the main character of this movie, right? Like I said, Benoit Blanc isn't necessarily the main character, but Josh O'Connor's father, Judd, I think had to shoulder a lot of the weight of the movie. And he did so really well. This is going to be a movie. We've seen him before. I've seen him before in different things, but I think this is really going to be the movie where if we see him again, if I see him again in a bigger role, it's going to be this movie that I remember. It's going to be this movie that I really think about, and go that, I know Josh O'Connor is a really supremely, talented actor. And I'm really excited to see him in other things as well. So anyways, I think that there's a lot to like about this movie. There's just a whole lot to like about this movie. I think that it, to me, stands tall as the movie of the year for me personally, as the most entertaining movie I've seen. I think the most critical, not critical in a way where it's in opposition, like I said, but really critically thinking and sharp in commentary and engaging and plot driven and character driven. This, to me, it epitomizes, I think, the best in movies. I had a similar feeling about Knives Out when it first came out. I said, when I watched that movie, late 2019, I want to say, I went, oh, yeah, no, that is a movie that will stick with me for a while. And this is a movie that's going to stick with me for a while. So, guys, those are my thoughts on Wake Up Dead Man, the third Knives Out movie. Have you guys seen it? I'm assuming that if you are still here for the spoiler review that you have, let me know what you thought about it in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, truthfully, I didn't know if I was going to be able to get this segment out in time for this week's podcast episode. It was a bit of a tight squeeze when you consider that Stranger Things Season 5, Volume 1 came out on Wednesday evening in the United States, dropped 4 episodes, and I usually try to lock these episodes in, the following week's podcast episode in, by Friday afternoon. So it was a bit of a tight squeeze, especially considering, there's Thanksgiving and had family and all that kind of stuff, but thankfully, especially for my own excitement, but also just for the YouTube channel and for being able to discuss it in as quick of a manner as possible, we got through it. I was able to watch all 4 episodes of Volume 1, Season 5 of Stranger Things, was watching it with a friend, and yeah, I have thoughts. I have so many thoughts. I'm sure you guys have so many thoughts, so let's not waste any more time. Let's dive into it. This is going to be a non-spoiler and then spoiler review for Stranger Things Season 5, Volume 1, which means we're going to be talking about just the 4 episodes that have been released. I haven't seen any of the other ones. And truthfully, as we get into this as well, I will not be able to actually discuss the other volumes and the finale, I guess Volume 2 and then the finale, in as timely of a manner as I will be traveling during the times when they are released. So hopefully we'll get to it as quickly as we can in the new year. But as for right now, let's talk about Volume 1. Guys, Stranger Things is one of my favorite shows of all time. I understand, as we've been doing, in the background of all this, I've been rewatching Stranger Things actually, and doing rewatches of seasons 1 through 4, and so posting those as we go along. I think you'll see the season 1 rewatch video or segment in a couple weeks. And as I've been rewatching Stranger Things, I kind of get it, right? Because people have this, I think the general perception out there is that Stranger Things season 1 is so good, it's so amazing, and then it kind of just drops off from season 2 and 3, and then season 4 comes, and it's just amazing again. And, for the longest time, I was kind of like, I don't know if I get that fully, because I really liked seasons 2 and 3. I did. In rewatching seasons 2 and 3, though, this time around, I kind of understood what people were talking about. I still really like season 2, and I don't care. I know some people really hate season 3. I like season 3. I might even love season 3. It has its problems. It's not for everyone. I understand that. But I think for the first time, I understood why people said, well, yeah, season 1 was great, but then it kind of fell off after that. But then season 4, I feel like, and I know plenty of people who kind of stopped watching after season 3 and they didn't get to season 4, which is such a shame because everyone who did, I feel like, has said to me, oh, but season 4 is where it really picked up again. And yeah, I agree. I think season 4, not that that the quality was massively improved over some bad seasons, but just that I think the story that they were trying to tell, the Duffer Brothers, has truly come into focus starting into season 4. And now we head into season 5, which is the final season. I had, been excited. I had been anticipating just like everyone else. I had seen most of the main trailers. I had even watched the first 5 minutes that they were releasing online. But I wanted to know as little as possible, other than some of the little hints here and there from various interviews and things like that I just happened to see. So I went into it pretty much, as blind could be doing what I do. Not that I didn't know anything, but I tried to stay away from as much of the plot as I could. I think, look, for season 5, right? And it's hard to review this knowing that we don't know, we don't have the full picture. I have some things in here that I will talk about that I think left me a little bit wanting. It's hard to say I don't like them because I just don't know how things are going to pan out over the whole season. And again, I don't think it's fair to make final judgments on a season when you've only seen half of it, right? But we're talking about the first half. We're talking about that. I'm going to talk about the full season once I've seen everything, hopefully in early January. But, it's not to say that I don't have things that I don't love and things that I think certain characters have certain storylines that are not as fleshed out or certain storylines that I don't think are going in the right directions. There are things here and there that we'll talk about in vague terms in the non-spoiler discussion, and then we will turn to spoilers towards the end of this. However, I will say, and it's hard because I'm seeing it for the first time. I don't know how to compare it to the other seasons, but this season is foot to the gas. It is full throttle. Everything is high octane. You barely have a moment to breathe. And so in that regard, it's not the same necessarily as other seasons where you're kind of building up to something interesting. I've noticed in rewatching Stranger Things seasons 1 through 4 is that the beginnings of the seasons, right? You're slowly getting acclimated to the idea that there's something wrong here and we have to kind of figure out what that is. In season 2, it was Will being possessed, and then in season 3, it was the Mind Flayer and Billy and the rats and all that good stuff. In season 4, it's Vecna, right? This season, it's just go. It's time to go. And there are certain things, right, that are being set up throughout the season that I'm sure will pay off and build up to something later. But I think that one of the biggest differences for season 5 is that you have all these characters. You take a little bit of time at the beginning to establish where they are and where they've been since season 4. But then after that, it's just time to go. And I think that works to its benefit because there's just so much happening here that while season 4 also, season 5 rather, like season 4, has ridiculously long episodes. I think the last episode of volume 1 was about an hour and a half long. It feels like still there's so much that they could explore. It feels like there is still more left on the table, which is a crazy thing to say, but I feel like it's true. And I think we'll kind of segue into maybe something I didn't love as much, but also something I do love. There are so many characters in this show now. There are so many characters in this show now. I'm not even going to capture all of them, but just to give an example. Hopper, Eleven, Mike, Will, Dustin, Lucas, Steve, Nancy, Jonathan, Erica, Murray, Joyce, Robin. I probably repeated a bunch of them a few times, but you get the point, right? Like, there's so many characters in the show now. And, on the one hand, while I would like a status quo update on where each one of them are, and you kind of get an idea of where each one of them are at the beginning of this, it's just time to go. So this is not the season, I don't think, for huge character changes or things like that. The characters have arcs, right? The characters are going through things. I think a few characters that stand out to me as having more interesting arcs. Will, we heard before that Will was going to have a very prominent role. And I think that makes a lot of sense because of, the fact that Will was the first one taken. He started it all in episode 1, season 1, and now it's kind of coming full circle with Will again, right? So Will, I think it has a lot of interesting things going on with him. I think Mike and Nancy have some really interesting things going on with their characters as well. And so I think they're being elevated. And yeah, I think the other characters have their roles to play. It's just that we don't get to explore a whole lot of where they are. There's some interesting storylines. Like, I'm not going to say every single character's storyline works. Or at least so far. I think there are a couple where I'm trying to balance out the fact of, is this what I would want to see personally? And I'm just not liking where they're going personally, but I can see where they're going story-wise, or is it a case of, it's just not quite working story-wise? I don't know. I think there is a balance there that I'm kind of interested to see how they're going to wrap up everything in later seasons. But there are definitely characters that we'll talk about in the spoiler discussion where I am like, yeah, I wish we got a different side of this character, or I'm not sure where this arc is going, all that kind of stuff. But this season, it's bloodier, it's more brutal. There are obvious stakes, right? There are obviously stakes that are being elevated. It's the final season. Also, new players, right? There are some new characters in here. I'm not going to spoil all of them, but one that we knew that was going to be having a presence in the show or in season 5 is Linda Hamilton's character, and she's interesting in her own right, though she's not given a whole lot to do in this first volume, but I think that she has a lot of interesting things that are going to transpire over the next few episodes. And obviously the threat of Vecna that is looming. And again, we saw him in the trailer, so it's not a spoiler. Vecna is in season 5, surprise, surprise. But I think that what is transpiring in and around Vecna's mind and what he's doing in this, at least first volume, and the places where we don't see him and the places where we might see him, I think is interesting. I think there are still a lot of questions that remain to be answered, and so I'm very curious to see where we go from there. But I do think that as we head into the final volume, as we head into the final 4 episodes here, I think that the stakes have been set, and now it's just a matter of, okay, let's untangle, let's unravel, let's unwind this big thread here that we've got, and see where we all go, because I think that there is I'm not saying that the show is buckling under its own weight. There's a lot of amazing stuff happening here. The visuals, by the way, one of the things I noticed immediately from the trailers is just that the visuals are, the way that the cinematography is, the way that the shots are composed. There's a great one-take shot in the final episode of this volume that I just don't think that the Duffer Brothers had done before, which is amazing. It's great doing a one-take. Some of the action is incredible. The Upside Down is really intriguing, and it's great, but also the real world has some really interesting things going on there. I think that this season has a lot going for it, and I think that it's in building up towards a final, confrontation, a final episode, a final moment. I think that this season, if you just take it as a final goodbye or a final just a moment to really escalate everything and bring it all to a head, and not really think of this season in the same regard, I think, as the first 4 seasons where you're kind of building up from beginning to end in its own self-contained way. This is a different season. I think this season is really trying to say goodbye, and it's trying to wrap up all these different things. And I think it's doing a really good job of it so far. I'm just curious to see where we go from there. One of the things too that I'll leave off this non-spoiler discussion is that this season does a great job of tension. There is so much tension throughout these entire 4 episodes. There is just heightened tension and ways where characters are doing things that you're like, oh my gosh, and then things that characters say that you're kind of like, oh no. I'm not to spoil anything, not to reveal anything, but there is a lot going on here that I'm really, I'm happy to be back in this world. I'm excited to see where it ends. I'm going to be very sad. There are some emotional moments in these 4 episodes as well. I think the ending as well of this volume is, I think it's just tremendous. It's great. And it kind of leads to exciting pathways of where this season is going to go as a whole. So can't really say a whole lot else in the non-spoilers about this volume, because I just don't know where we're going to go, and I don't want to reveal anything that's happened in this volume. But those are my thoughts on Stranger Things Season 5, Volume 1. Let's transition into spoilers really quickly before we get on out of here. Okay, I think it's great that Will is powering up, because I think Will has had enough. I think we all agree Will has had enough of being a helpless kid who's just been puppeted around by Vecna. Will has had enough. I am really excited to see where he and perhaps Eleven together are going to power up and do some great things, do some really interesting things in the second volume. Speaking of 11, I really thought Hopper was a goner. Now, I'm not saying that he won't be in this season. I just feel like it's coming, especially with the foreshadowing of what he said to Elle and revealing his what do you say? His backup plan, his failsafe, right? I think that it's just foreshadowing something very tragic, but also heroic for him. as well. I liked the twist that, because I kind of think everyone's like, oh, it has to be Vecna in there. And I kind of thought, well, surely it's not Vecna in there, right? That would be kind of weird. Now the question will become, as we start off volume 2, what has Vecna actually been doing? Where has he actually been if he's not been in that cage? Because who is in that cage is number 8, right? 11's sister from that episode in season 2 that everyone kind of hates. But she's back, and I think that this is a very interesting and compelling way to bring her back, actually. So I'm excited to see what they do with that character as she and 11 reunite. And I wonder what happens to all the other kids, or what happened to all the other kids as well. I wonder if that will come into play. Speaking of character arcs, though, I have to say, not everyone worked for me. Like, I get why Dustin is angry and why Dustin is not Dustin. It's just so jarring, though, after watching seasons 1 through 4, that Dustin, yeah, he gets serious. Of course he gets serious, and especially in season 4, he has, he's taking some leadership, right? But this version of Dustin just makes me sad. And the fact that he and Steve are arguing this entire volume, it's not, I don't know, it just makes me a little sad. And I hope that in this last volume we get a little bit more of that Steve Dustin dynamic, because just watching season 3 again, it just makes me happy. It makes everyone happy, right? Also, Steve and Jonathan, I don't know. It's funny. Like, it is actually funny. The scene at the beginning where they're all climbing up to the top of the tower, it's funny and it's entertaining. I just hope that they resolve it in a way where it doesn't, it's starting to give YA love triangle vibes a little bit, and I just hope that the way that they resolve all of that is going to be satisfying for the audience. Other characters that don't have a lot to do, I think Lucas and Max are going to have a lot to do. I like the way that they incorporate Max a lot in Holly's vision. Oh, Holly, by the way. I think that's a great introduction to a character that, yes, has been there before, but for all intents and purposes is a new character to the show. And so I like that a lot. And I like how they incorporate Max into her mind or Henry memories or whatever. I think that that's going to be really cool. And I think Lucas and Max are going to have a lot to do in later seasons, or in later episodes as well. I like Mike. I like Nancy. Like I said, I think that because of what happens to their parents and to Holly, I think that they have a very central role to play, which I think is great. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't love Hopper and Elle in this volume. I think that they just didn't have a whole lot to do other than walk around the Upside Down and kind of be mad at each other. And then Hopper kind of fake death, does his fake death thing, which I think, again, the moments that they have with one another where it's harkening back to their dynamic as father and daughter, it's great. But then the moments where Elle is just, kind of trying to push him away again, it makes me a little bit sad. So I'm glad that wasn't the final moment that Hop had with 11. But yeah, guys, I think that, I like that. Actually, I was really surprised. I thought Vecna was totally going to take Will, because we hear that line in the trailer, right? You're going to help me one last time. And so I totally thought that Vecna was going to take Will into the Upside Down as a prisoner. I was really surprised that he didn't. I don't know. Is Vecna's plan to have Will be superpowered? Maybe that is part of the plan here. So we'll see. We'll see about that. But I think it's interesting that Vecna just kind of disappears into the Upside Down again at the end of volume 1. But again, that final action scene as well it's just great. The way that it was shot, and the one take where Mike is protecting the kids. I think Derek, he's growing on me. I think he's playing the role that he needs to play. So there is that. But guys, again, really excited about volume 2. A lot of really exciting things are being set up here, and I can't wait, guys. I'm happy. Stranger Things, it's back. So look forward, by the way, for those of you who have stuck around, to a revisited or rewatch kind of segment in the subsequent weeks, where we'll dive into seasons 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then that'll lead up to hopefully my review of the final 4 episodes and the season as a whole. And then, of course, eventually on my own, I will definitely do a full series rewatch at some point. So, guys, those were my thoughts on Stranger Things season 5. Volume 1, episodes 1 through 4. What did you guys think of season 5, volume 1? Let me know in the comments down below. And guys, that will do it for episode number 106 of the Access Blockbusters Pod. Thank you so much for joining us. We are heading into December. So much fun ahead of us as we wrap up the year. And then we'll have a lot to look forward to. Stranger Things, guys, it's not over yet. We'll have more to talk about in the coming weeks and in the new year. Thank you so much for joining us. Make sure to subscribe. We are on the road to 2,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel, and then audio-only platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Overcast as well. That will do it, guys, for episode number 106 of the Access Blockbusters Pod, and I will see you guys in the next one.